Hey, what's up, guys? Tyler here with Secure Team. Well, I don't know if you've heard about this very intriguing story that's just hitting the web. Well, of a man who claims that he time traveled from the year 2048 to warn us of an alien invasion. Oh, and one other thing, he was drunk. According to the reports, this drunk man, arrested by police in Wyoming this week, says that he had traveled back in time from the year 2048 to warn civilization about the imminent arrival of aliens. Officers arrived to find Bryant Johnson, warning that aliens would be coming next year and that people should leave as soon as possible. Johnson was so concerned about his mission to save humanity that he requested to speak to the, quote, president of the town. Cops said Johnson had bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, and a blood alcohol reading that exceeded legal limits. But the alleged time traveler had a perfectly logical explanation. The only way the aliens could send him back in time was to fill his body with alcohol and make him stand on a giant pad. He was, of course, arrested nonetheless. Now, another thing the man said was that he should have actually been transported to the year 2018, but he ended up landing a year earlier. So, certainly not the first time that we've had someone claim to be a time traveler, although I'm inclined to believe that this guy was probably just blitzed out of his mind. And you would think that if aliens had the technology to send people into the past, they would at least be able to get the year correctly. And despite how comical or real you think this story is, this reminded me of some other stories where people have legitimately and seriously claimed to have been time travelers. And with many mainstream scientists today admitting that time travel is actually theoretically possible, from Stephen Hawking all the way back to Albert Einstein. It really does make you wonder, even if all of these people I'm about to list turned out to be just faking it all along, what if just one of those turned out to be legit? And what that would mean, and just how much of a mind job that would be. So the first case I wanted to talk about was about a pilot who is said to have entered a parallel dimension. It occurred in 1935, where a wing commander with Britain's Royal Air Force named Sir Victor Goddard flew his open cockpit biplane from Scotland to England on weekend leave. On the way, he passed over Drem Airfield near Edinburgh, which had been constructed during World War I. The tarmac and 4 hangars were in despair, and barbed wire divided the field into numerous pastures filled with grazing cattle. Returning home a day later, Goddard ran into a violent storm and lost control of his plane. When he finally recovered from a downward spiral that should have resulted in his death, he was just several feet above a stony beach. As he climbed back up through the rain and fog, the sky suddenly filled with sunlight. Below him was Drem Airfield, only the farm had disappeared, and the hangars were no longer in disarray. At the end of the restored tarmac stood 4 bright yellow planes, and 1 unfamiliar monoplane. These were surrounded by mechanics in blue overalls, notable to Goddard since RAF mechanics only wore brown. So the question was, had Goddard, considered to be one of the founders of the RAF, simply been confused about his location? Or had he traveled forward in time? He later died in 1987, so we may never know the truth, unless, of course, he returns from the past to tell us. There's one fascinating case of a journalist who experienced an air raid 11 years before it occurred. His name was J. Bernard Hutton, who, along with his photographer Joachim Brandt, were sent by a German newspaper to do a story on the Hamburg shipyard in 1932. It was an uneventful visit until the bombs began raining down. Hutton and Brandt realized that they were caught in the middle of an air raid and hightailed it out, but not before snapping some photographs. When they got back to the center of Hamburg, no one believed their story. They developed the photos they took, intending to prove to everyone that they weren't crazy. In fact, they proved the opposite. The photos showed no signs of an air raid. 11 years later, Hutton was living in London when he opened up a newspaper and was shocked to see a story about something called Operation Gomorrah, an air raid on Hamburg. The accompanying photos looked exactly like what he experienced in 1932. In 1996, a man and his wife were shopping in London when his wife went into a bookshop while he took off for a CD store down the street. As he walked away from the bookstore, he noticed that everything was suddenly quiet. Then, a van that looked like it was from the 1950s honked and swerved around him. Somehow, he noticed that he was standing in the middle of the street, and stranger than that, everyone around him was dressed in 50s-style clothing. Confused, he tried to go back to the bookstore, but it wasn't there. In its place was a woman's clothing shop named Cripps. So he went into the clothing store, but as soon as he did, it was a bookstore again. He was back in 1996, but he couldn't figure out what happened to him. The man, who was also a police officer, found out later on that Cripps had actually existed, but not since the 1950s. Probably one of the most well-known stories of time travel came in the year 2000 when a mysterious man by the name of John Titor claimed to have traveled back in time from the year 2036. So in November 2000, the Time Travel Institute forums saw a spike in unusual activity. Nestled among the usual conspiracy theories and far-fetched UFO sightings were a string of posts from a man who called himself John Titor. He said that he was a soldier based in Tampa, Florida, from the year 2036. The government, he claimed, sent him back in time to 1975 to retrieve an IBM computer, which they needed in order to debug some computer programs. He hopped off of his time machine in 2000 for personal reasons, and since he was already there, he figured why not warn everyone about how crappy the future was going to get. He claimed that civil unrest would begin in the United States in 2004, and by 2008, there would be a full-blown civil war. By 2015, he said the US would split into 5 different regions, and that World War III would have come and gone. Of course, none of these things have happened, so you're probably wondering why did people believe this guy? Well, it was because his posts about time travel were so detailed, the description of its mechanics and his machine so thorough, that it seemed almost impossible that he wasn't telling the truth. And besides, if it was all of a hoax, surely the person behind it would have dreamt up a better hometown for himself than Tampa, Florida. I'm just playing, guys. Shout out to all my people from Tampa. And so these stories go on, and for the sake of time, these are obviously all, oversimplified versions, but like I said, what if only 1% of these turned out to be true? And of course, then we have the photographs, all of which are said to show possible time travelers in action. Probably the most known is that of the time-traveling hipster, snapped in a photograph taken back in the 1920s. Notice the man's strange hair, glasses, and outfit, all sticking out like a sore thumb amongst the much more reserved crowd. Next, we have a photograph that's said to have a gentleman in it taking a picture on what appears to be a cell phone of some sort, only this occurred in 1962. Here's a super old photo taken during the gold rush, where sitting amongst the normal-looking people is a guy that has become known as the Surfer Dude. And finally, we have one of the most famous photographs of a young boy standing in a crowd during an address by Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg. The boy in the photograph is claimed to be that of Andrew Basiago, who in a nutshell basically is said to have taken part in a top-secret government operation called Project Pegasus back in the 1970s. Mr. Basiago stated, quote, "I am the boy standing in the foreground of the image at center left, looking to his right. My shoes were lost in the transit through the quantum plenum that took me from the plasma confinement chamber at the Time Lab in East Hanover, New Jersey in 1972. where I was then transported to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania on the day that President Abraham Lincoln gave his famous address in 1863. So there you guys have it. You know, I could go on and on, but I think you get the picture. Tales of time travel, although very hard to prove, are no less bizarre and intriguing to those who start digging into the data and the stories and the testimony. And at the end of all of it, again, I say, what if? And on that note, I want to thank you guys for stopping by today. So be sure to share and subscribe on your way out, and stay tuned because I've got more videos in the works. I'm glad to be back. I'm mending, I'm researching, I'm checking emails, so look out for that new video soon, and I'll see you back in just a bit. Stay safe, guys.